That Christmas morning the marina was quiet, eerily so. The waves moved slowly against the dock pilings like they too were unsure what to do with all that silence. A low-hanging fog blanketed the bay, muting everything into grays and silvers. The Evelyn, my sailboat and sanctuary, swayed gently in her slip, waiting like me for a day that would never quite arrive. I'd gotten up early, out of habit more than excitement. I brewed the good coffee, Evelyn's favorite roast from a small shop in Tampa, and set out 3 chairs on the dock beside the boat. One for me, one for Amanda, and one for Tyler. Their 3 kids usually sat on the deck steps with cocoa in mismatched mugs, their laughter spilling over the water like sunlight. I set the mugs out anyway. Old habits are hard to break, especially the kind you build around people you love. I even wrapped their presents, each one marked with a tag in my late wife's handwriting. Yes, I'd saved them over the years and reused them. A small lie to make the gifts feel like they came from her. A scarf for Amanda, the deep wine color she always pretended not to like, but wore every winter. A limited edition fishing lure set for Tyler, and for the kids, a set of science kits, a telescope, and one hand-sewn sailor hat for Max, the youngest, who had once declared he'd be captain of everything. By 8:15, I knew they weren't coming, but I stayed. At 9:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. One message. No photo, no emojis, just text. Dad, we're doing something different this year. Amanda booked us on a last-minute cruise. The kids are thrilled. Hope you understand. We'll call when we're back. Tyler. I stared at the message so long the screen dimmed and locked itself. Then I looked at the 3 empty chairs lined neatly in front of me. I had even laid out Evelyn's crocheted blankets so they wouldn't get cold. Not even a phone call, not even a Merry Christmas. Just a message after they'd already left. The worst part wasn't the abandonment. It was the casualness. As if leaving your father alone on Christmas morning after years of tradition was no different than canceling a dinner reservation. As if I'd become optional, like a museum they used to visit when the kids were small. Quaint, nostalgic, forgotten. I didn't reply. There was nothing I could write that wouldn't be swallowed by the same indifference that sent that message. Instead, I poured myself another cup of coffee, picked up Evelyn's favorite mug, the one that said I like quiet people, they listen, and sat there alone watching the fog roll over the bay like a curtain drawn on a life I no longer recognized. The cruise they took was one I'd suggested months ago. I had even offered to cover the costs, booked the suite, and watch the kids while they explored shorelines. Amanda had smiled politely, said they'd think about it, then ghosted the conversation like it had never been brought up. Now I knew why. They didn't want to bring me, they just didn't have the decency to say it. That night, I didn't sleep. I made a pot of chili, but it went cold untouched. The marina was still, save for the occasional clang of metal against mast and the low whistle of wind between rigging lines. I sat at the helm of the Evelyn with a fleece blanket and a copy of Evelyn's journal. I didn't read it, I just held it, like holding her hand one more time. By midnight, I made a decision, one I never imagined making. The next morning, I drove into town to meet with my attorney, Michael Whitaker, a man I'd trusted for nearly 2 decades. Richard, he said, shaking my hand firmly, I thought we weren't updating the trust until spring. There's been a change, I said quietly, a very personal one. He gestured to a seat. Tell me. And I did. Not just about Christmas, about the pattern. The way my son and his wife had slowly begun treating me less like family and more like an ATM with a dock. The missed birthdays, the ignored calls, the thin gratitude when a wire transfer saved their vacation or helped with the kids' tuition. I don't want revenge, I told him. I just want clarity. He opened a fresh file and nodded. We can do that. By the time I walked out of his office, the first revision was in motion. The terms of my estate would change, not to punish, but to preserve. not to destroy ties, but to protect what Evelyn and I had built from being misused, misunderstood, and ultimately unremembered. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel bitter. I felt clean. That night, I sat on the dock once more, 3 chairs still there, 3 mugs untouched, but this time I didn't wait for anyone. I raised my own cup to the open sea and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Evie. They won't erase you, I promise." By New Year's Eve, the silence had grown thick. No follow-up message from Tyler. No awkward cruise photos sent with obligatory captions like "Wish you were here." Not even a check-in from Amanda, who usually called around that time to ask if I still had Evelyn's chili recipe. They had gone quiet, and that, more than any apology, told me everything I needed to know. On January 3rd, a box arrived at my doorstep. No card, just a return address from a coastal hotel in the Keys. Inside were souvenirs, matching t-shirts for the kids, a tiny snow globe with a palm tree in it, and one single wrapped pastry labeled Cuban rum cake, Dad's favorite, in Amanda's handwriting. I stood at my kitchen counter staring at it for nearly 10 minutes. The cake had gone stale, just like the gesture. No one sent a stale apology unless they believed the damage had already passed. But they were wrong. The hurt was fresh. Every day it replayed in small ways: the chairs I now avoided sitting in, the cocoa mugs I couldn't bring myself to wash, the nautical charts I'd once marked with future family routes, and now saw as nothing more than forgotten coordinates. The next day, I returned to Michael's office with a folder of documents, account statements, property deeds, and a list I'd drafted in longhand. "Is this everything?" he asked. "It's everything that matters," I said. He looked over the list, brow furrowed slightly. "You're including the boat?" "Yes, and removing them from shared ownership. They never earned it." That week I began making quiet changes, not out of spite, but intention. The kind that says, "I see what you've shown me, and I believe you now." I closed 2 college funds, both of which Tyler and Amanda had long considered a given, although they'd never asked how they were funded. I revoked the family gas card Amanda had been using for her SUV. I terminated the line of credit that Tyler had once tapped to cover a backyard renovation he never finished, and I did it all without a word. If they noticed, they didn't say. But I know when people feel a shift, even if they won't acknowledge it out loud. One evening, I ran into Margaret down at the marina. She was Evelyn's closest friend and, since her passing, had become something of a gentle presence in my otherwise solitary life. "You look like a man unmoored," she said, passing me a cup of cocoa with cinnamon on top. "I'm trying to get anchored again," I replied. She took a seat beside me on the bench overlooking the harbor. "You've spent your whole life building a legacy. But a legacy isn't something you give, it's something you protect." That line stuck with me. All night, in fact. I wrote it down in my notebook under the heading, "Why I'm Doing This." 3 days later, Tyler finally called. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave one. He texted instead, "Hey Dad, noticed the gas card isn't working, something up with the bank." That was it. No mention of Christmas, no mention of Evelyn. Just the card, just the access, just the symptom, not the sickness. I didn't reply. That same evening, I pulled out Evelyn's will, not because I doubted her choices, but because I wanted to feel her intentions again. She had written a note in the margins of the last page, long before she got sick. "If they ever forget who you are, remind them gently, and then walk away with your head high." It felt like she was still guiding me, still anchoring me. On Sunday, I took the Evelyn out alone for the first time in months. I left before sunrise. No destination, just movement. The sky was a soft purple, the water calm as glass. I charted no course, followed no plan, just the wind and instinct. And in that stillness, I heard Evelyn's voice, not literally, but in the way memories echo. "You can forgive them without giving them the keys." That's when I knew. This wasn't just about money. It was about access. Access to me, to the life Evelyn and I had built, to the legacy they assumed was theirs. They had mistaken kindness for obligation, and that was the line. When I returned that afternoon, a neighbor mentioned that Tyler had come by while I was out. Didn't look too happy, she said. Was pacing around your porch like a man trying to remember where he buried something. I chuckled once, then let it go. He wasn't looking for memory. He was looking for entitlement. The line had been crossed, not just by a missed Christmas or a lazy text, but by years of slow erosion, of love taken for granted, of inheritance treated like a guarantee, of me treated like a seasonal fixture instead of a father. And now the tide had turned. 3 weeks passed before Tyler said anything that resembled concern. Until then, it had all been transactional. Card declined, access denied, questions framed like IT tickets. But on a cold Thursday morning, I opened my email and found something different. A PDF attachment. A subject line that simply read, "Let's get everyone back on the same page." Inside was a draft, a document titled Family Trust Adjustment Proposal, prepared by Amanda's friend, a junior estate attorney, whose email signature still included class of 2018. The document was clean, professional, and deeply insulting. It outlined a new structure for distributing my assets to ensure equity among beneficiaries, using phrases like modern estate alignment and early assurance clauses for adult dependents. I was stunned, not by the content, but by the assumption. They believed they could outpaper me, outplan me, rewrite my legacy while I was still alive and drinking my morning coffee. Michael nearly dropped his glass when I showed him the draft over lunch. "They want you to pre-assign shares of your own estate," he asked, flipping through the pages, "and they're calling it reconciliation. I think they believe I'll just sign to keep the peace." He pushed the document away. "This isn't reconciliation, this is leverage." That night I sat at my dining room table with a pen in one hand and a legal pad in the other. I didn't reply to the email. Not yet. Instead, I wrote a letter. Not to Amanda or Tyler, to the 3 grandkids. A letter I wouldn't send immediately, but one I wanted to have ready. "Dear Anna, Josh and Max, if you ever wonder why things changed, why Grandpa stopped showing up the way he used to, I want you to have this. Grown-ups sometimes forget that love isn't a contract. Your parents treated kindness like currency. They started asking for things not with gratitude, but with expectation, and when I stopped giving, they didn't ask why. They just asked what happened to the benefits. But you 3, you're still learning, you still listen. If you ever choose to ask about me, I hope someone gives you this letter. Love, Grandpa." I folded the letter and sealed it, labeled it, to be opened when the narrative gets rewritten. Then I placed it inside my fireproof safe, right beside Evelyn's sketches of the Evelyn and the original deed to our first house. Legacy wasn't just about money, it was about clarity. 3 days later, Amanda texted me, "Did you get the draft? We're not trying to take control, just trying to avoid conflict in the future." I stared at the message, then typed 2 words, "Understood, declined." No lecture, no threats, just a clean refusal. Because peace doesn't come from silence, it comes from certainty. The next time I saw Amanda and Tyler in person, it wasn't planned. They showed up at the marina one Saturday afternoon while I was cleaning the stern deck. Amanda wore that performative smile that never quite touched her eyes. Tyler looked tired, hair too long, guilt settling in his posture. "Mind if we come aboard?" Amanda asked sweetly. "Yes," I said, not unkindly. "I do." They stood in awkward silence. Then Tyler blurted out, "We thought you'd at least hear us out." "I've been hearing you for years," I replied. "You just didn't know I was listening." Amanda crossed her arms. "So what? This is it? You cut us out? Rewrite everything because of one holiday?" "One holiday?" I raised an eyebrow. "Amanda, it's never been about Christmas. It's about the version of me you constructed. Someone passive, predictable, pliable. A man you could rely on financially, but never respect personally. Tyler looked down. Amanda didn't. She sighed. "You've changed." "No," I said calmly. "I've remembered who I am." They left quietly. No shouting, no door slam. Just two people walking away from a man they no longer understood because they'd never taken the time to try. And as they disappeared from view, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. February arrived like a tired apology, gray, cold, and forgettable. The marina was quieter than usual, most boat owners opting to stay inland until spring offered better sailing weather. But I kept showing up. Routine in my case wasn't a schedule, it was survival. I spent my days detailing the Evelyn, cleaning her hull, polishing railings, updating electronics. She'd never looked better. It was as if I were preparing her for something bigger than a summer voyage. Maybe I was. Maybe I was preparing her for a future that wouldn't include the people I once built her for. It was around that time I realized something painfully simple. They never called to apologize. Not once. No late-night text filled with remorse. No letter. No visit just to say, "We're sorry we hurt you." They only called when things stopped working, when the bank account locked, when the card declined, when the benefits dried up. That was the rhythm of our relationship now. A pattern built on access, not affection. And now that the door had closed, the silence was loud. One afternoon, I bumped into an old friend, Martin Bell from my engineering days. We were both grabbing lunch at a quiet seaside diner just up the road from the harbor. He was there with his daughter and grandson, a tight-knit trio, all smiles and inside jokes. He noticed me watching them and offered a seat at their table. "Still sailing alone?" he asked kindly. "Mostly," I said. His daughter Camille smiled. "Dad talks about you all the time. He says you built the best team anyone ever had." I nodded, flattered and surprised. Martin leaned closer. "I told her how you used to remind us that stability isn't a lack of motion, it's choosing where to anchor." That line hit me harder than I expected. I had forgotten I ever said it. And yet, here it was, echoing back at me in a context I hadn't applied to myself. Later that night, back on the Evelyn, I pulled out my old logbook, originally meant for sailing notes and technical adjustments, but over the years, it had become a personal journal. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "February 14th, no call, no explanation." It's not about the day, it's about the fact that they know what they did, and still chose silence over ownership. I thought about Evelyn. She would have handled this better, with her mix of softness and steel. She could say the hardest truths in a way that made you feel loved and corrected at the same time. She used to tell me, "Don't chase people who only show up when you're useful. That's not love, that's customer service." She was right. Around the third week of February, Amanda finally sent a message. A photo of the kids, Anna holding a science fair trophy, Max with a missing tooth and a pirate hat, Josh mid-sentence, looking completely unaware he was being photographed. There was no caption, just the photo. No apology, no request to talk, just a glimpse, a breadcrumb. I stared at it for several minutes. They looked happy, they looked loved, but it wasn't an invitation. It was a performance, proof they were managing fine without me. I didn't respond, not out of anger, out of understanding. This was her way of saying, "Look, we're doing okay, but okay isn't the same as whole, and pretending nothing happened isn't healing, it's avoidance." That weekend I took a short solo sail down the coast. The weather was brisk but manageable. I chartered a simple route, docked overnight at a quiet port, and spent the evening sketching updates for the boat's interior, not to sell her, never that, but to reinforce her, to make her more mine than she'd ever been. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. When I returned to the marina, there was a small envelope tucked into the cabin hatch. It wasn't from Amanda, it was from Anna, written in crayon on notebook paper. It said, "Grandpa, I miss your boat. Do you remember when we saw the dolphins? I drew one. Love, Anna." The dolphin sketch was rough, lopsided, joyful. It was the first thing in months that felt real. I taped it above the navigation console, not as a keepsake, as a compass, because sometimes the people who still see you as whole without conditions are the ones worth anchoring for. March brought warmth, but not the kind that thawed what had frozen between us. The days stretched longer, the breeze softened, and families returned to the marina with laughter in tow. Children rode scooters along the docks, couples unpacked coolers onto their boats, and seagulls circled above like summer was already on its way. The Evelyn gleamed in the sunlight, her railings polished, her sails refolded with care. I'd poured myself into her, sanding, repainting trim, rewiring lights, not just to pass time but to reclaim something, a ritual, a rhythm, but nothing I did could keep me from noticing the one thing still missing them. Not Amanda, not Tyler, the grandkids. I hadn't heard from Anna since the dolphin drawing. No follow-up, no awkward bridge from Amanda pretending to coordinate a visit, just stillness. And then on the first Sunday of March, I arrived at my slip to find something waiting for me. A folded piece of paper, taped to the back of the dock chair I usually left out for Anna during spring sailing, written in black pen, with rounded, hesitant handwriting. Dear Grandpa, we're sorry we didn't come on Christmas. Mom said it was a grown-up decision, but I think grown-ups forget how to say sorry sometimes. I still want to come on the boat. I think Josh and Max do too. If we draw another dolphin, can we come? Love, Anna. I sat down on the dock with that note in my hands, the wooden chair creaking beneath me, the sun flickering across the water like it didn't know whether to comfort or mock. I read it again and again, until the words blurred. I didn't cry, but I did feel something break open inside me, a tightness I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Anna wasn't writing as a pawn. She wasn't trying to manipulate. She was just a child asking to be seen, and maybe to offer something back. I walked back to the Evelyn, dug through my drawer of old stationery, and pulled out a thick note card, the kind Evelyn used to keep for writing recipes or thank yous. I wrote slowly, deliberately. Dear Anna, thank you for your note. You're right. Grown-ups do forget how to say sorry. Sometimes they wait too long and miss the chance. But I'm still here. The boat's almost ready. The dolphin might still be waiting. Tell your mom I'd be happy to have you and your brothers visit. Just you three. No pressure. I'll bring the juice boxes. Love, Grandpa. I placed the note in an envelope, sealed it, and drove to their neighborhood. I didn't knock, didn't linger, just slipped it through the mail slot and left. 2 days later, Amanda texted. They were thrilled. Thank you for making space for them. I'll stay out of the way. Short, uncharacteristically humble. It felt more like a retreat than a response. But that was fine by me. Sometimes the best thing someone can do is step aside. That Friday, I returned to the marina to prepare the Evelyn for the visit. I restocked snacks, laid out the kid-sized life jackets, cleaned the deck with extra care, even tied a small bell to the helm like Max liked. I wasn't expecting a miracle, but I was expecting joy, and for the first time in a long while I felt it brewing. Soft, quiet, honest. As I locked up for the evening, I turned back toward the dock chair where Anna had taped her note. The wind had shifted, tugging the last bit of tape loose, and the paper fluttered slightly, still clinging to the wood. I walked over, gently removed it, and folded it into my pocket, not to throw away, to keep, because sometimes the smallest notes hold up better than the loudest explanations. The Saturday morning they arrived was cool and golden, the kind of morning that makes even old boats feel new again. I had been up since sunrise, wiping down the deck of the Evelyn, checking the cleats, recoiling the lines. It wasn't nerves. I'd hosted dozens of guests before, but there was a different kind of anticipation today. This wasn't about making the boat look presentable. It was about making it feel like home again, if only for a few hours. I hadn't seen the kids in person in nearly 5 months, not since the fall when they'd come by for a quick visit, before Amanda and Tyler whisked them away for a ski trip. That day they'd barely made eye contact. This day felt different even before they arrived. The marina was unusually quiet for a weekend, which I appreciated. I didn't want their first steps aboard to feel like a spectacle. I wanted it to feel like a memory. At exactly 9:04 a.m., I heard the scuff of sneakers on the dock. Anna came into view first, holding Max's hand while Josh trailed behind with a small backpack slung across one shoulder. They weren't running. They weren't bouncing with excitement. They were just walking, steady, unsure, but present. That was enough. I stepped down from the stern and met them at the edge of the dock. Anna spoke first. "Hi, Grandpa." "Hi, sweetheart." She looked around, then added, "It smells like salt and old wood. I missed that." Josh nodded toward the deck. "Did you fix the cabin light? The one that flickered last time?" I smiled. "Rewired it last week. It's steady now." Max squinted at the water. "Are there sharks today?" "Only friendly ones," I said. He grinned. "I brought juice boxes and my pirate hat." I stepped aside, arm outstretched. "Permission to board." Max saluted. "Permission granted, Captain Grandpa." Watching them climb aboard, no parents, no tension, no expectations, felt like stepping backward through time, like unwrapping a sealed moment I thought I'd lost. They explored the deck in quiet fascination, like they were reacquainting themselves with something that had once belonged to them. Anna sat cross-legged near the bow, sketching in her notepad. Josh helped me check the helm. Max wandered below deck and came back up holding Evelyn's old compass keychain. "She used to shake this," he said, "to hear if it still jingled." He looked up. "It still does." I nodded, throat tight. "It always will." We didn't go far, just a gentle loop around the bay. The wind was soft, the current mild, ideal for beginners, but enough to make it feel like a real voyage. At one point, Anna asked, "Is it okay that we're here?" "Of course it is, even if Mom and Dad aren't, especially then," I said. "Some things are better without noise." She looked back at Josh and Max, who were leaning over the edge, searching for dolphins. "I like quiet," she said. "So did your grandma." After we anchored in a small cove for lunch, Max pulled a peanut butter sandwich from his backpack and asked if we could have a pirate name for the boat. "It already has one," I said, "but you can add a secret one just for us." He grinned. "Let's call it the Salty Sandwich." Josh groaned. "We are not calling it that." I laughed. Democracy at sea is complicated. By the time we returned to the marina, the sun had tilted westward. The golden light turned softer, richer. The kids were quieter now, not tired, but settled, like the ocean had rocked something loose in them and made room for calm. As they disembarked, Anna turned to me. "Can we come again? I mean, even if your parents don't want you to?" I asked. She hesitated. I answered for her. "You're always welcome. You three are not responsible for what adults do or don't do," Josh added. "We didn't know how to ask before. You just did." They hugged me, each in their own way. Anna's was soft and thoughtful. Josh's was awkward but firm. Max's was loud and enthusiastic. He accidentally knocked my hat off. I wouldn't have changed a thing. That evening, after I'd cleaned up and put the boat to rest, I sat on the deck with a mug of tea and stared out over the water. Not grieving, not hoping, just present. The wind rustled through the sails, and somewhere behind it, I thought I heard Evelyn's voice again. Just a whisper. That's what healing sounds like. After the visit, everything went quiet again. But this time, it felt different. Not the kind of silence that bruises your pride or echoes your disappointment. This one felt respectful, like a pause between movements in a song. The kind that invites reflection rather than resentment. The kids didn't come back the next weekend. I hadn't expected them to. I knew Amanda and Tyler would have something to say, probably not in front of the children, and almost certainly behind closed doors, but I didn't care. They could protest all they wanted. They could frame it as meddling or manipulation, but the truth was simple. I had opened my boat, not my checkbook, and I had done it with open arms, not obligations. And the kids had come, not out of pressure, but out of longing. That mattered more than anything. A week passed, then two. I didn't hear from Anna, but I didn't worry. I had learned something from Evelyn that took me years to appreciate. Love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers from a distance and trusts you'll hear it. So I waited, not passively, but with intention. I went about my days polishing chrome, filing tax papers, updating my will's language yet again with Michael. I clarified a clause about educational gifts to ensure that any grandchild who visited the Evelyn for learning or sailing purposes could receive financial support through a separate trust, not a reward, a recognition, a record that time spent with heart meant more than time spent with handout. Michael read it carefully and nodded. It's subtle, but powerful. Evelyn believed in teaching. I said, this makes sure they know it. Late one Thursday afternoon, I was walking back from the bait shop when my phone buzzed. A message from Amanda. Not a long one. She wasn't one for paragraphs, but surprisingly, not hostile either. They've been asking to come back. I haven't said no. No punctuation. No qualifiers. But it was something. The door hadn't reopened, but maybe the bolt had been lifted. That weekend I received 3 small envelopes in the mail, each addressed in a different child's handwriting. Anna's was neat, careful, and precise. Josh's was all caps, slightly crooked. Max's looked like a pirate had written it mid-storm. Each one included a drawing. Anna had sketched the Evelyn in charcoal pencil, with dolphins leaping in the background. In tiny cursive beneath it, she wrote, "Home is the place where you're allowed to ask questions." Josh sent me a list of possible grandpa boat rules, including, no yelling juice boxes are unlimited. Grandpa gets final vote. If dolphins show up, we wave. No phones unless someone falls overboard. Max sent a treasure map drawn on a napkin with an X on my backyard. I taped all 3 drawings on the cabin wall, beside Evelyn's compass sketches. The wall was beginning to feel like something sacred, not a museum, a message board from the next generation, a quiet, colorful rebellion against transactional love. That same evening, Amanda called, not a text, an actual call. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. "Hello," I said evenly. There was a pause. Then they came home glowing. I didn't speak. I don't know what you said to them or did, but they haven't stopped talking about dolphins and juice boxes and knots. They said thank you, I replied. They asked if they could come. I said yes. Another pause, then softer. "I didn't expect you to open the door." "I didn't," I said. I opened the deck. It wasn't a truce, not yet, but it was no longer war either, and that was something. After the call, I poured a glass of Evelyn's favorite red wine, stepped onto the porch, and sat down in the rocking chair she had stained herself the year we moved here. The breeze was light, warm, the tide pulled in gently, and for the first time since Christmas, I felt no weight on my chest, not because everything was resolved, but because I had stopped waiting for people to carry what was never theirs in the first place. The paper had been sitting in my safe for over 6 years, folded neatly, tucked behind Evelyn's will and our house deed. It wasn't legal, it wasn't notarized. It was a note, one Evelyn had written by hand in her final summer, after the first signs of her illness, but before it took hold. It began like this: "If I go before you do, promise me one thing. Don't give away what we built to people who treat you like an obligation." I remember reading it the first time and thinking it was her way of being protective, almost too protective. I'd waved it off as sentiment, a love note disguised as caution. But now I understood it for what it really was, a warning. That afternoon, I opened the safe not because I needed to access anything, but because I wanted to feel close to her. I'd been carrying the weight of decisions she once helped make, and in her absence, I'd found myself second-guessing. Was I being too harsh, too proud, too lonely? The moment I unfolded the letter, her voice returned, not literally of course, but in the way only someone who knew you completely could still reach you after they're gone. If they forget to visit you on holidays, forgive them. If they forget to respect you, remind them. If they forget how to love you, protect yourself. It was the last line that settled something inside me. And if they only come back when something is up for grabs, close the door. You don't owe love to greed. I sat at the kitchen table with the letter for a long time. No pen, no coffee, just silence. Then I picked up my phone and called Michael. "We're updating the appendix again," I said. He didn't even ask why. The next morning, I drove into town and met him in his corner office. Sunlight pouring through the blinds like a spotlight on the truth. Michael pulled up the current trust documents on his laptop. "You want to add new stipulations?" "Yes, and remove some old ones." We worked for 2 hours, line by line, clarifying what would happen with the Evelyn, the house, and the remaining accounts. I didn't cut them out entirely. That would have been easy. But easy doesn't always mean right. Instead, I installed conditions. For Tyler and Amanda, any access to liquid assets would be preceded by a full calendar year of active personal contact, not just calls or texts but visits, letters, and participation in family rituals. They would have to submit a written summary of their family's shared values, to be reviewed by a third-party trustee, not to pass judgment, but to reflect whether they'd bothered to understand what legacy meant. For the grandkids, separate trust funds would be held in escrow, accessible only for education, travel, or charitable purposes, and only after age 18. Those who spent a cumulative total of 30 hours aboard the Evelyn under supervision would be granted co-ownership rights, with rotational use. Michael leaned back in his chair when we were done. "You've turned your legacy into a character curriculum." "Good," I said, "because inheritance without reflection is just a windfall, and windfalls disappear." Before leaving, I handed Michael a sealed envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Something for my grandkids, to be given only if Tyler and Amanda contest anything." He slid it into the case file without asking further. He knew better. That night, I returned to the safe and placed Evelyn's letter back in its original spot right on top. Then I added something new, a single page I'd written by hand. "To my future heirs, if you're reading this, I hope you've chosen to value time over things, truth over comfort, and character over convenience. You won't find luxury yachts or vacation condos in my name. You'll find a sailboat that weathered storms, a porch that held quiet conversations, a compass that never lied." I dated it, signed it, and felt more settled than I had in months, because what I had just done wasn't about revenge. It was about remembrance, not punishment, protection. The knock came on a Tuesday, mid-morning, light, hesitant. Not the kind of knock that announces itself with confidence, but the kind that asks a question before you've even opened the door. I knew it was Tyler before I even looked. Fathers just know. I hadn't seen him in person since the failed trust document, the one Amanda had drafted and emailed like an invoice. Since then, there had been silence, save for Amanda's cryptic messages and the occasional photo of the grandkids that felt more curated than connected. But now, here he was, standing on my porch in jeans and a wrinkled windbreaker, eyes tired, hands shoved in his pockets like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to be there. "Hey," he said. "Hey." He rocked on his heels. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, not out of anger, but calibration, then stepped aside. He entered like a man walking into a place that used to be his but now felt foreign. His eyes lingered on the hallway photos, the mantle, the worn edges of Evelyn's favorite armchair. He didn't sit. I waited. Eventually he spoke. "I got your new terms." Of course he had. I said nothing. He glanced toward the dining room table. "That clause about character hours aboard the boat, is that real?" "Every word," I said. He nodded slowly. "You're serious." "I've always been serious. You just stopped listening." He didn't argue, didn't snap back. Instead, he pulled a folded letter from his jacket and placed it on the table. "I found this," he said quietly, "in Mom's cookbook drawer." I picked it up, recognized Evelyn's handwriting before I even unfolded it. "If you're reading this, I hope you're learning how to say thank you without expecting a reward. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It didn't need to be. I didn't know she wrote that, Tyler said. I didn't know she felt that way. She felt everything, Tyler. She just didn't weaponize it. He sat down finally, exhaling hard. I think we broke something. I don't even know when it happened. I do, I said. It wasn't a moment. It was a habit. He rubbed the back of his neck. I thought we were just trying to take care of the family. No, I said gently. You were trying to control the future without being present in the now. He looked up, eyes wet but not falling apart. So, is it over? Depends. On what? On whether you came here to get something back, or to give something forward. He sat there, quiet, the letter between us. Then finally, I don't want the boat. I didn't think you did, but I want the kids to know it, to feel it, to learn from it. Then bring them, I said. Not for a photo, for a memory. He nodded, then stood. We didn't hug, we didn't shake hands, but something passed between us, an unspoken agreement, or maybe a surrender. He walked to the door, then turned back. I miss her, he said. I do too, I replied, but I'm learning to carry her. When he left, I stood in the doorway for a long while, holding that letter Evelyn had written, the late sunlight pouring in like grace across her words. She had seen this coming, not the specifics, but the drift, and she had left us breadcrumbs, not to lead us back to her, but to help us find ourselves. That evening, I opened the drawer beside the bed and added Tyler's name to a new envelope, not because he had earned it yet, but because he'd taken the first honest step without asking what it would pay. By late April, the rumor had started to ripple through the family, quietly at first, then with more urgency. The legacy wasn't going to be what they thought. That's how Amanda phrased it when she left me a long voicemail. Her tone wasn't angry. It was confused, like someone who had bet on a sure thing and couldn't understand why the numbers weren't adding up. I don't mean to sound ungrateful, she said, but the kids thought the boat would be theirs. You always said it belonged to the family. She wasn't wrong. I had said that. But the word belonged had changed meaning over the years. Belonging is earned. It's not a right of proximity or paperwork. It's what's left behind when the giving is mutual, not one-sided. When people show up to patch sails, not just sail away with the wind in their hair. That's what Amanda never understood. To her, the Evelyn was a prize. To me, she was a person, a vessel of memory, of work, of grief, of love. She was Evelyn's final gift to me, and no one would take her for granted while I was alive. I didn't call Amanda back. I wrote a letter instead. Not long, not cruel, just clear. You're right. The boat was always meant for the family, but only for the parts of the family who remember what the boat meant. If that changes, so can the legacy. But until then, the wheel stays in hands that steer with care. I mailed it the next morning, folded inside a nautical chart that had the kids' initials marked on their favorite fishing spots. A week later, Max sent me a voice memo. Grandpa, I remember the blue fish, the one that jumped next to the motor. Josh said it was a magic fish. Do you think fish remember boats? I laughed out loud listening to it, then saved it, twice. The next time the kids came aboard, something shifted. Josh brought a notebook. Anna carried a clipboard. Max wore a fake badge that read First Mate in Training. They weren't just there to play. They were there to learn. We spent the whole afternoon going over rigging basics, wind direction, knot tying. I showed them how to read the sky, not with apps or radar, but with eyes and instinct. Evelyn would have been proud, not because they were performing, but because they were present. After docking, we sat on the deck with ginger cookies and orange soda. Josh looked out across the water and said, "Is this what being rich feels like?" I smiled. "Why do you ask?" "Because I don't think it's about money," he said. "It's about having a place where people don't pretend." That stunned me. I nodded slowly. Yes, Josh, that's exactly what it feels like. That night, I revised my will again, not dramatically, just a final touch. A clause that read, "This boat shall belong to the first heir who logs 50 hours of intentional time aboard, not for leisure, but for learning, helping, and remembering." Because legacy isn't a line on a document, it's a practice. When I met with Michael to file the updated paperwork, he read the clause and chuckled. "You're the only client I've ever had who's turning a sailboat into a classroom." "It always was," I said. He leaned back. "You really think they'll earn it?" "I think one of them already has." Afterward, I returned to the Evelyn and sat by the helm. I ran my hand along the rail, where Evelyn once carved a small letter E when we first bought her. It was barely visible now, worn down by salt and sun, but I could still feel it under my fingertips. She had always believed in showing people who they could become, not just who they were. I was trying to do the same, not for Amanda, not even for Tyler, but for the kids, because they were still becoming. It was tucked into the smallest drawer of the cabin, behind some old maps, a broken pair of sunglasses, and a tarnished brass lighter I hadn't used in over a decade. Evelyn's compass, not the one we kept mounted near the helm, but the one she carried in her jacket pocket, a gift from her father, passed down through quiet hands and never talked about like something grand, just useful, dependable. She used to tap it when she was thinking, even when we were docked, even when we weren't sailing anywhere. "I like knowing which way I'm facing," she would say, "even if I'm not moving." I hadn't touched it since she died. Couldn't. It was too loaded, too heavy with the weight of her absence. But that morning something nudged me toward it. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the stillness in the air, the way the Evelyn swayed gently like she was waiting for instruction. Or maybe I just missed her voice more than usual. I opened the drawer. The compass was still there, still warm from the sun filtering through the cabin window, still pointing north. I held it in my hand and realized I wasn't holding a tool. I was holding an answer, not to any one question, to all of them. Later that day, I took the compass and pinned it to the cabin wall just above Anna's dolphin sketch and Josh's boat rules. Max's pirate map was already beginning to fade from the sun, but I left it up too. Together it all looked like a mosaic. A family story told in scraps and drawings and memories that didn't need to be explained, just kept. I looked at the compass, steady in its place. Evelyn's legacy wasn't in the money. It wasn't in the trust documents or the property. It was in the way she had taught me. And now I was trying to teach them to keep course even when storms hit, to know where true north was, even when no one else believed in the map. That weekend, Tyler showed up again, alone, no kids, no Amanda, just him. He stood at the edge of the dock and waited until I looked up from my book. "You sailing today?" he asked. "Maybe. Mind if I come?" I hesitated, then nodded. He boarded quietly. We didn't talk much as we prepared to launch. He helped me untie the mooring lines, checked the engine oil, moved like someone who had been watching and remembering more than I'd given him credit for. Once we were in open water, he finally spoke. "I read the updated will," he said. "All of it." I said nothing. He added, "I think you're right." That surprised me. "About what?" I asked. "About legacy. About who earns what." He looked out at the water. "I spent years thinking I deserved a piece of something just because I shared your name, but I didn't realize you were waiting to see if I could carry it." "And can you?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. "Then I don't know, but I'm starting to want to." We sailed in silence for a while. At one point I reached into the cabin and handed him Evelyn's compass. He looked at it, confused. "She carried it everywhere," I said, "even when we weren't moving." He turned it over in his hands. "Does it work?" "Always." He looked up. "You trust me with this?" "Not yet," I said honestly, "but I trust you with the chance." When we returned to shore, he gave it back. Didn't ask to keep it. didn't make a speech, just left it on the cabin table with care. That told me more than any apology could. That evening I sat alone again on the deck. The compass sat beside me, steady and sure, and for the first time since Christmas morning I felt the future moving toward me, not as a threat, not as a loss, but as a map still unfolding, and I wasn't afraid to follow it anymore. The marina was livelier by May, boats returning to the water, barbecue smoke drifting from stern decks, neighbors calling out across slips like a floating neighborhood waking from hibernation. But even amid the liveliness, I felt calm, centered. Not because anything dramatic had happened, Amanda hadn't written again, Tyler hadn't made any grand gestures, but because things had finally found their weight, like the boat had balanced herself, no longer tipping with every ripple in the water. The kids visited twice more that month. Both times they came prepared, not with toys or demands but with journals, questions and stories. Anna read aloud a passage she'd written about wind patterns. Josh asked if he could learn how to track weather using sea charts instead of an app. Max, of course, demanded a Captain Grandpa certificate, which I promptly created in crayon and stuck on the wall beside the compass. We didn't talk about the past, not much. They didn't ask why their parents had been distant. They didn't press for explanations. They just wanted to be part of something real, and I let them. One Sunday evening after a long day on the water, Anna lingered behind while the boys packed up. She stood at the bow, staring at the compass. "Did Grandpa use this?" she asked. "Every trip, even when you weren't lost. Especially then." She looked up at me. "I think I get it. I think you do too." The next morning I returned to Michael's office for the last adjustment to the documents. We finalized the legacy clause, the one tying the Evelyn's ownership not to age or bloodline or seniority, but to hours logged and lessons learned. Michael smiled as he slid the file into his drawer. "You've made a map no one else would have drawn." "That's because no one else sailed with Evelyn," I said. That evening I stood alone on the deck, just after sunset. The kids were gone. The house was still. The bay shimmered in the dying light, and gulls circled overhead as if guarding something sacred. I took the compass from the wall, kissed it once like Evelyn used to, and placed it back in its drawer. Not hidden, just resting. Later I wrote one last entry in the logbook. May 22nd, wind light west. Guests 3. No parents, no noise. Notes: Anna took the helm. Josh plotted our course. Max fell asleep in the cabin with a juice box on his chest. Evelyn would have called this a perfect voyage, because this wasn't a story about punishment. It wasn't even a story about revenge. It was a story about memory, about drawing the line between what you leave behind and what you refuse to let be taken, and about knowing, without a doubt, that your legacy isn't something written in ink, it's something built in character. Summer arrived quietly that year. There were no grand vacations, no extravagant getaways, no family cruises with staged photos and matching t-shirts. The kind of summer Amanda had always curated and posted online like proof of closeness. Instead, there was stillness, grounding, days spent on the porch, evenings aboard the Evelyn, conversations that weren't recorded or hashtagged, but remembered. One morning in June I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo album. The front was labeled, "Christmas Cruise, Memories." Every page was filled with glossy photos. Amanda and Tyler on a sun-drenched deck, champagne flutes in hand. The kids, mid-laugh on a beach, room service trays, polished dining rooms. But there was something missing in every picture. Joy. Real joy. The kind that doesn't come from itinerary checklists or resort smiles. The kids looked tired, their faces framed too perfectly, their expressions distant. It was an album built for display, not for remembering. At the back was a handwritten note from Amanda. "We didn't know what we were losing. I don't know if we still can fix it, but I hope someday they look back and know where they were truly seen." I read the line twice. then closed the album and placed it on the shelf, not to forget, but to mark the moment. The cruise they took had cost them more than airfare. That same afternoon, the kids came over for a planned overnight on the Evelyn. Their first. Anna helped pack the dry food. Josh checked the emergency kits. Max brought his pirate sword and a flashlight, just in case sea monsters attacked. We anchored off a quiet cove where the wind hummed through the rigging and moonlight stretched across the water like silk. After dinner, they sat in a circle on the deck and took turns asking questions. Max, what's the scariest thing you ever saw at sea? Josh, did Grandma ever get mad at you? Anna, do you ever miss being alone? That one caught me off guard. I looked at her, older now than I remembered, her eyes deeper, her voice steadier. Yes, I said softly, but I don't miss it when I'm with people who make space instead of taking it. She nodded. She understood. Later, after the boys had fallen asleep in their bunks, Anna stayed up, wrapped in a blanket. She stared at the compass glowing dimly in the lantern light. Do you think this boat will still be around when I'm grown up? If you treat it right, I said, and if you remember why it matters. She looked over the edge, watching the reflection of the stars. I don't want stuff, she whispered. I want to know how to hold on to the right things. You already do, I said. In the logbook that night, I wrote, June 17th, first overnight, with all three. Max made pirate laws. Josh corrected my charting math. Anna asked better questions than most adults. The cruise they missed couldn't buy this. The next morning, when we returned to shore, the kids helped clean up before Amanda came to pick them up. She waited at the dock, unsure if she should approach the boat. I waved her aboard. She looked surprised. She stepped carefully, eyes scanning the deck like it might reject her. Everything okay? She asked. They're learning, I said. That's all I wanted. Amanda looked at her children, sandy-haired, smiling, proud. Then she looked at me. Thank you, she said. I nodded. Teach them to keep what matters. She nodded, and for the first time in years she didn't look like she was performing. She just looked like a mother, trying. As they walked away, I stayed behind, hand resting on the helm, the boat quiet beneath me. The ocean didn't roar, the sky didn't shift, but something in me did. Because legacy wasn't just surviving betrayal, it was outliving it. It happened quietly, as most lasting things do. No grand announcement. No lawyer standing in a suit reading off a will. No viral video. Just a man at peace, sitting on the deck of his boat, watching three kids chase each other along the dock, laughing, tripping, living. That was my inheritance. Not the money I'd set aside, not the boat I had polished, but the space I'd cleared for truth to land, for time to teach, for love to mean more than convenience. One early July morning, just before the 4th, I received a letter from Anna, a real letter, folded, stamped, handwritten. Inside was a single line. I think I've found my true north, Grandpa. Thank you for showing me the compass wasn't the only thing that pointed the way. She had drawn the Evelyn again, this time with stars around her, like she was sailing through the night without fear. I pinned it beside Evelyn's original compass, where it joined the gallery of quiet legacies stitched onto wood and memory. Later that week, Tyler came by unannounced. He didn't ask to board. He simply stood at the dock and handed me a paper, a letter addressed to his children. I think it's time they hear from me, he said. I took it, nodded. He lingered a moment, then turned to leave, but before he did, he looked back and asked, "Do you think she would have been proud?" I didn't hesitate. I think she already is. That evening, I held Evelyn's compass one last time before placing it in a velvet case, engraved with her initials and the date of our wedding. I locked it in the drawer beneath the helm, where the kids already knew to find it when the time came. Not now, not yet. But one day, when the anchor had to pass, I sailed out alone that weekend. No destination, No crew, just the wind, the sky, and the voice in my memory that had never really left. I dropped anchor in a quiet cove and sat on the stern with a mug of coffee, watching the ripples stretch toward shore. For a long time I said nothing. Then finally, softly I whispered into the open air, "Evelyn, we did it. We gave them more than things. We gave them a compass." And when I returned to shore, there was a note tucked into the dock line, written in Max's backward letters. It read, "Grandpa, you forgot your juice box. We saved you one." And the dolphin waved back, "We think it was her." I smiled, folded it gently, and placed it inside the logbook, because some legacies don't need signatures, just witnesses. And as the sun dipped behind the sailboat's mast, I sat with one hand on the wheel, the other on my heart, knowing I didn't need to write one more word or prove one more point. I had said everything I needed to. I had anchored it all where it mattered. If this story touched you in any way, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. Your voice helps this story reach someone who might need it.